So James chapter 1, starting at verse 19 says, "My dearly loved brothers." That's a good point. Let's pause there. just for a second. Okay, my dearly loved brothers. I love that word loved. Technically, it should be translated beloved. Brothers who are beloved. Okay, so if you have a translation that says beloved, awesome. Okay, here's what's cool. We do not have to work for the love of God. We get to work and grow from the love of God. Okay, we don't have to work for it. We are loved up front. I love that. That, hey, brothers, you are loved. Regardless of how you've lived, regardless of what you've done, you are loved. Okay, and almost every other religion in the world, you have to earn the love of God. Okay, even when you look at like Islam, you have to earn the love of God. And even at the end, he could still put the faithful in hell. That's how Allah is viewed in the Quran. When you look at Buddhism and all those, you have to earn the love of the deity. You have to work to get that salvation. But in reality, God starts by loving you. And that's where he starts. You start already loved by God. Yes, there is wrath because of sin, but you start with love right up front. So we get the great privilege of knowing that up front, we get to work not for the love of God, but from and out of the love of God. So that is just awesome. So James just real simply says, my dearly loved brothers, understand this or know this. Concentrate on this. Make sure you figured this part out. Everyone must be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger, for man's anger does not accomplish God's righteousness. Therefore, ridding yourselves of all moral filth and evil, humbly receive the implanted word. You want to underline that. Humbly receive the implanted word which is able to save you, or able to save your souls. Therefore, I have that verse on there twice. Able to save your souls, but be doers of the word and not hearers only. It's the first half of 22. We'll cover the rest of 22 next week about not deceiving yourself, which is a really odd concept. You can deceive others, but deceive yourself is weird because you know who you're deceiving. So it's a weird concept. We'll hit that next week. But receive the implanted word, which is able to save you or save your souls or save your life, but be doers of the word and not hearers only. I had told you to underline that first part there and there toward the end of verse 21, to receive the implanted word that saves you. This is a key concept we just need to hammer out up front. Then we're going to go backwards and do all that little proverbial listing that James did as far as an explanation and understanding of what this means. Okay, so the implanting of the word that saves you. God acts like a gardener. Okay, implanting is a gardening type metaphor or motif, if you will. So God acts like a gardener, and he plants something within you, and the goal of that implantation is that you will then receive it. That planted word will grow into something. It's kind of like Jesus in the parable of the four soils. Okay, the sowers out there casting seeds. Some of the ground simply rejected it. Some of it, the birds came and took it. And some of it actually grew into the ground. It was implanted, but it didn't really take root. It wasn't properly received. Okay, so this is James kind of working from his bigger brother's analogy there. That, hey, God's sowing this stuff out there. He's putting out seeds in the ground. It's been implanted. Now receive it. Okay, he knows he's writing to a church. He knows he's writing to people that are already followers of Jesus, and he is telling them to, hey, you've got the word, you're reading it, you're hearing it, but it needs to be received. It needs to be more than just a mental academic exercise. It needs to start doing something, some type of change, some type of growth, some type of root system that has branches. It's supposed to have a tree inside your body, as weird as that would be, but that's that analogy that's being formed there. Okay, so receive this implanted word. Okay, in fact, Dr. Kurt Richardson, he is a professor at Southwestern Theological Seminary in Texas, Southern Baptist Seminary in Texas, made this statement that this tree, this implantation, this receiving of this implanted word, this receiving is an active word. It's not a passive word. It is something that you continually have to do on a regular basis. You don't just receive it once. You can't just put water on a tree once and expect the roots to stay held. It's a continuous, active, ongoing reception and receiving that you're going to have to, once it's there, you're going to have to work with it and nurture it and grow in it and develop it. You're going to have to hear preaching and reading and then rereading and recitations, and you're going to have to really work with it over a continual basis. Okay, it requires active concentration. Requires active concentration. But here comes the question that I have then is, what will it take? What does it take to do that? What does it take for that reception to take place? How do we know if it's happening? What can we do to better receive it? What role do we play in this wonderful process? Okay, and that's what James gives us up from verse 19 to this point in 21. Are ways of knowing that you are receiving it. Ways of knowing that it indeed is happening. Things you can do to receive it better and what it's going to look like. Because God's not going to change you for you. He will save you. He will forgive you. That's all His part. But now you have the responsibility to grow, to change, to mature. I know how much we would love for God to just go, zap, you're changed. I know you might have prayers like that for your spouses. You know, God, please make my spouse more patient and understanding. And God's like, I'm not going to go and go, touch. Now they are. Wish granted. You know, He's not a blue cartoon Robin Williams. He is not going to, a genie. Come on, you guys not watch Aladdin? That's even an old show. Okay, and so He's not going to do that. And so many people will say, God, change my boss, change my kids, change my parents, change my friends. And we just want God to change. And if we realize we have a problem, we might even say, God, change me. Make me not desire this anymore. And God's like, you know, you're going to have to work that one out. I'll give you the strength and the courage, and I'm going to help you through it. But you're going to have to pull that weight. You're going to have to do that. I remember as a kid, I used to pray, God, give me muscles. Like, I'm talking Arnold Schwarzenegger. I want to be beefed out like not the current Schwarzenegger. That's not the beefed out I'm talking about. I'm talking about, you know, the old Commando days, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Raw Deal, Arnold Schwarzenegger, okay, Predator, where, you know, twins, where he could, you know, I was like, God, give me muscles. And I know that God, He never granted that prayer. Obviously, He never granted it, and because He thought that was funny. He's like, I made you small. You know what you'd look like if you were, and with the itty bitty little head sitting on top? That would just be, no. Absolutely not. Okay, but we pray, God, change. Please change us. And He says, then change. Start doing something about it. So this is what we can do. This is what it's going to be. Our four things that James gives us that what change looks like and what we can do to change. And the first one that he gives us there at the beginning in verse 19 to 21, the first one is that we are to be a person who listens more than speaks. Because he said you must be slow to speak. Okay, slow to speak. That means that you listen more than you speak. And I'm going to be honest with you. This is going to be fun. There are people who talk too much. I know. Right now, you're going to be like, really? You, a preacher, are going to talk about not talking too much? Isn't that hypocritical? Yeah, but overlook that. Okay. No, I'm not talking about what a teacher does or what a preacher does. I'm not talking about that type of talking. There are some people, they just talk too much. You know, they're like they're like that song. They just yakety yak, and they don't want you to talk back. Right? This is how they are. They just always have to give in their 2 cents. If there's an issue, they always have to give their thoughts. They always have to give their opinion. They have an answer for everything, and they tend to even speak out of their ignorance and even out of their admitted ignorance. I kid you not. People will admit their ignorance and still give advice. I get this in school a lot because I teach several classes at college, and I'll be like, okay, here's this concept that this person in the textbook said. He developed this concept. What does this concept mean? And everyone would be like, Someone would raise their hand. I'll say, yes, what's this concept mean? Okay, and the kid would go, I kid you not. He would say, I don't know, but could it be? And then he'd give the answer. I'm like, well, if you don't know, shut up. What do you mean? I don't know, but could it be? I have no idea, but maybe it could. Could you imagine a doctor who did that? Well, you're there, you got something on your foot and something's wrong. He's like, well, I'm no expert on feet, but I think the problem is, well, if you're no expert on feet, go get one. Don't give me your opinion if you don't know. Could you imagine giving directions that way? How do you get to the Grand Rapids Art Museum? Now, I don't know where it is, but I think that if you were to go down Monroe and go left, where are you going? But could you give directions that way? No. But people do stuff like that all the time. I hear that at the bus station. Do you know how to get to the nearest McDonald's? I'm like, it's like a mile away, and from here, you might be able to, I'm like, there's a lot of construction, and then a guy shows up and says, all you have to do is go down here and turn left and go over there, and I'm like, dude, that's not even the right way. Why are you giving directions if you don't know? But people do that. They speak out of their ignorance. They speak out of their ignorance. And they'll come, they'll hear like one fact, and then they gotta speak. They'll hear one thing on the news, and suddenly now they got it all figured out, and they're an expert. I'm gonna tell you something. CNN is not an expert make. If that's your source and that's all you got, zip it. You have no business talking. You're just talking out of ignorance. Okay, so it's just an issue that is prevalent in our society is people talk too much. And that is really destructive also in relationships. How many of you are maybe married to someone or related to someone that you try to tell them something and they interrupt you? And they just won't listen. They're quick to speak, not slow to speak. I know I sometimes struggle with that because I think I read my wife's mind. And I don't. And she'll say something, and I'll want to finish her sentence. She's like, that's not where I was going at all. Well, that's where you should have been going. That's where I was thinking, It's a struggle for all of us, but we got to be slow to speak. Okay, we got to be slow to speak. And you're going to see why this is so important to James in just a little bit. But we need to hammer out what this all looks like. Okay, so we have to be slow to speak. That means being a good listener. It means being a good listener. That means that when someone's talking to us, we're going to give them eye contact. That means that we're going to stop doing other things at the same time because multitasking doesn't work. It's not effective. It really isn't. I don't care if you think you can read a book while crocheting and talking to someone at the same time with the TV on in the background. Something's being ignored. Multitasking is a myth like that. It really is. So if you're going to be listening to someone, stop doing what you're doing. Give them eye contact. Be present in the moment. Don't interrupt. If you're saying anything, you're not speaking your opinion first. You're repeating some of what they said, and you're clarifying, and you're asking questions for more information so that you're talking from an understanding point of view rather than ignorant. And give appropriate noises and grunts inside little things like or huh, okay? Avoid the or right, unless you agree with the person. Because if you use that as a side comment and you don't agree with them, you tell them, if you use which sounds like you're agreeing, or right, sounds like you're saying you're correct. And then later you say, I think you're wrong on all that. Now the person thinks you betrayed them because you agreed with them up to that point just to tell them they're wrong. That's weird. So, that's what it means to listen. In other words, to make it simple, communicate your listening. Communicate with all your words, with your behavior, with your nonverbal cues, with your eye contact, with what you're doing. Communicate your listening. But if you're just all going to be focused on what you're going on and what you're doing, and you're not going to listen, then you're being fast to speak because you're telling them that they're not worth listening to. You'd rather watch the game. You'd rather read a book. You'd rather be online. You'd rather be throwing my phone on the floor. You'd rather be, I've seen people, they'll be talking to someone. They're just doing this all the while they're talking. Yeah, oh yeah, really? Look at that. What are you doing? I'm just texting. Yeah, put that down. You're not listening. Well, I heard what you said. Well, there's a difference between being able to repeat someone's words and really listening. Just like there's a difference between being able to quote verses from the Bible and living it. There's a high, complete difference. Okay, so there's a difference. So we got to just listen. Be a good listener and communicate to the other person that you're listening. We have to be slow to speak. Okay, slow to speak. speak. And in addition to being slow to speak, a person who has macrothumos. Not a great word. I'm going to increase your vocabulary today. Macro means big. Very good, very good. People were guessing out of ignorance. Not slow to speak there. Just teasing. Yeah, macro means big. We could probably deduce that because if you're the opposite of macro would be mini. Okay, so macro means big. And thumos, we get the word thermometer from it. Okay, so yeah, and basically through macrothumos means be patient. James uses the phrase, be slow to anger. Okay, be slow to anger. Macrothumos literally is like an expression of slow to anger. It means have a long fuse. Have a long wick that burns slow. That's what macrothumos means. You have a long wick and it burns slow. It's kind of like when, I'll never forget my brother-in-law, Alan and I were trying to work with fireworks, and we had this big, long, honking wick to light the fireworks with, and we had it like, I don't know, 20-some feet long. And in my mind, I was thinking the movies. You light it, and it goes, boom, and there it goes. No, it's macrothumos. You light it, and you wait a half hour for it to go 20 feet, because it's going, and I'm like, yeah, that's lovely. Not what I want for fireworks. Okay, but that's macrothumos, where you have a wick, but it burns slow and is extra long. Okay, that's what that means. It means you're slow to get angry. But you know, how many people are not slow to get angry? That anger tends to be their first response. That they just kind of start with, you did something, bam, I'm angry. You said something, bam, I'm angry. And on it goes. I run across this weekly, especially at the bus station. I'll be talking to one customer in front of me, and a person walking by thinks I said something to them. They didn't even hear it right, and they'll turn around and charging at me with a big exploded anger. And I'm like, dude, I wasn't even talking to you. I was talking to this person right here. You just go away. But they're all exploded because that's their first response. And many Christians are that way. Many of us here are that way. I know because I've seen it. Somebody says something, boom, immediate anger. That's that first response. Do you want to know how anger like that becomes such an immediate response? It's like from 0 to 60 in 3 seconds. It's because we trained our minds to have that response. We have told ourselves a story over and over again. That story says that I am not going to get what I want, and as a result, my life will not be satisfying. That's that story. And then when somebody says something, we think that is what is going to cause our story to come true. And so we respond out of that immediate anger. You said something bad, well, now I'm offended. I feel like you've said something against me. Now this might be true. Now I'm hurt. Now I'm wounded. Anger. And we automatically assume negative motives to people. And if we're going to be slow to anger, we're not going to start with the assumption of negative motives to people. We're going to start with assuming the best out of people. Well, aren't people born sinful and fallen? Yes. And we're going to assume the best of people up front. If you don't start with saying that, hey, I'm going to assume that your goal and what you're saying is to hurt me, to belittle me, to reduce me, to remove my happiness, to destroy me, we're not going to start there, especially with someone we love. Especially with someone in the church, especially with someone in our family, especially with someone that's our child or our parent. We need to kind of start with that type of a premise if we're going to be slow to anger. Okay, we need to start with that premise. Now, what if they've hurt you repeatedly in the past? You still start with that premise. You start there if you're going to be slow to anger. If you're going to be slow to anger. You don't make all of what you need for satisfying on life dependent upon that individual. You be slow to anger. You work hard to get there. Okay? In fact, did you know of all the verses in the Bible that are quoted by the Bible? Isn't that a fun statement? Okay, of all the verses in the Bible that's actually quoted by the Bible. So that usually means an Old Testament verse that's quoted later in the Old Testament and again in the Old Testament and also in the New Testament and later in the New Testament. So a verse said early on, one of the most common repeated verses is Exodus 34:6. And it says that the Lord is slow to anger. If we're going to be like God, If we're going to try to reflect him, then we are to be slow to anger like he is slow to anger. And I find it fascinating that that is one of the most repeated phrases in the Bible, is that the Lord is slow to anger. What's neat about Exodus 34 is at the end of the chapter, at the end of that section there, it does say that God declares that the guilty will go punished and no evil is overlooked, which means God has a wick. But that wick is long and it burns slow. God will get to the point that anger will happen, but it takes a while to get there. Okay, that's how God is. He is very patient. He is very patient, and he has macrothumos. And it's interesting that James says, be slow to anger. And it's amazing how many people will report against that. They'll refute that. They'll push back. They'll say, well, the Bible also says, in your anger, do not sin. And the Bible says, and here's what James adds to that. Here's what James basically flat out declares. Don't be so arrogant as to think your anger is equal to God's. Just because God gets angry does not mean that your anger now is holy. Just because it says in the Bible, in your anger do not sin, does not mean that every time you're angry, you are not sinning. Okay, in fact, James flat out says that man's anger does not produce the righteousness of God. That's in verse 20. Okay, he says that man's anger is a fallen anger. Even if it's about injustice, that anger will not properly correct the injustice. Sin will be involved somewhere. That's James' point of view. Okay, that's what James is bringing into this equation. He is saying that your anger is not equal to God's anger, and your anger does not produce the righteousness of God. It will not correct injustice. It will not fix the problem. If anything, it's going to add to it. So be slow to anger. Okay, be slow to anger. And I'm telling you, spouses, hear this. Children, hear this. I know how easy it is that a parent or a spouse can make one statement, do one thing, and you want to jump straight to 60 miles an hour. You didn't take out the trash. Why are your socks on the floor? Why did you walk past the coat rack just to put your coat on the chair? Okay, why do you keep nagging me? You're just like your mother. Hello, sofa. It's... we respond straight with anger. And James is like, man, reel that in. Reel that in. Okay, to just be slow to anger. Don't start by assuming negative motives on people like that. So James continues on, and he says, hey, if this word is going to be received, if it's going to be implanted, if the word that's implanted is going to be received, if it's going to grow, if it's going to sprout, if the roots are going to be there, other things you're going to have to start working on, and signs that it's happening are going to be that you're going to be a person who gets rid of all, and he uses this phrase, moral filth. You got to love a word like that. Okay, it's like a junk drawer term. Anybody have junk drawers? Usually the top drawer of the dresser, or a drawer in the kitchen right off to the edge of the counter by the corner somewhere, right? It's interesting. You're like, yeah, that's where mine is. It's usually in certain locations, and what's ironic is it's one of the easiest accessible drawers because it's a way you can open it and just kind of go, it goes in there, deal with it later. And then like 2 years later, it goes in there, I'll deal with it later. Then you sell the house going, what do I do with this drawer? I'll dump it in a box. And I'll box it, label it miscellaneous, and I'll deal with it later. Where does that box go? Somewhere hidden in a closet in the back, or it's underneath a crawl space somewhere, or it gets emptied back into that drawer in the corner, and you deal with it later. It's that junk drawer. Moral filth is a junk drawer term. Okay, what's in a junk drawer? It seems like everything. Yeah, every type of junk you can think of. It's just filled with a whole pile of stuff. Okay, and it's not like it's all one category either, other than junk. Okay, but it's not like all. You'll find screws, you'll find paper clips, you'll find tape. You'll find something that broke off something you just kind of shoved in there and get out of the way, maybe a pencil or two, maybe you'll find a barrette, maybe you'll find a nose clipper, who knows what you'll find, okay? A back shaver, who knows what you'll find in there, but you're going to find stuff in that drawer, a whole collection of stuff. So moral filth is like a giant term that says anything that's immoral, you're going to start getting rid of that. And another way of wording it would be this. People who are receiving the implanted word will not be moral compromisers. They will not be moral compromisers. They will say that if I love Jesus, then I'm only going to date people who love Jesus. If they don't love Jesus, automatically disqualified. They're going to be a person that says, I'm going to do what Jesus wants me to do, even if it's inconvenient, even if it's not easy, even if it means like temporary social isolation, even if it means a loss of a pay raise or a promotion, even if it means I'm going to be a person who follows Christ completely, and I will not be a moral compromiser. Okay, that's that whole junk drawer thing. It's kind of a way of looking at people who don't do this. They don't get rid of all moral filth, and they still want to say that they follow Christ. It kind of looks like this. They'll say they want to follow Christ with this part of their life, but not with this other stuff. I'll change here, but I'm not going to change here because I know it's sin, but I like it. And here's how weird that sounds. Because basically, if you say it's sin, you know that it's wrong, you're saying that it's nasty. But then you're saying you like what's nasty. It would look like this. The other day, I went to my cousin, and I had a bottle from my baby, from George, and it smelled raunchy. Okay, I smelled, you know what, over 24 hours milk smells like in a bottle, right, with baby formula mixed with it. A gag reflex right off the get-go. And what I did was, I'm cruel. I just took the lid off, and I'm smelling like, oh my gosh. And I looked at my cousin, and I said, hey, smell this. And she grabbed it and smelled it, because I was so friendly about it. So she grabbed it and went, and she started doing that. And I went, ah. So funny. Now, what if I had like one of those bottles, but I also had a sippy cup that had milk in it from my daughter that also was as raunchy and icky. And then she smelled one, oh, that's horrible, that's nasty. Why'd you give that to me? She grabbed the other one, oh, that's horrible, nasty. Let me smell it again. You'd be like, what's wrong with you? She just said, why are you going back to that? It's making me want to throw up. It's horrible. But I like it. What? Has messed, would you agree, messed up? See a counselor, right? Yeah, right? That's messed up, okay? So that's what someone says if they say, I got this area, I got my life stinks, it's nasty, I got all these nasty behaviors, I'm willing to change these for Christ, but these I'm not. I'm going to keep these little pet sins. I'm going to keep this sexual perversions and pornography or whatever. I'm going to keep these lies and swearing and whatever. I'm going to keep these sins. I'm going to keep these. Yes, it's nasty. Yes, it makes God gag. It makes me gag, but I've grown numb to it that I kind of like it. Okay, that's what a moral compromiser does. And James is saying, stop it. Do not be a moral compromiser. You're going to want to follow Christ completely, and you're going to want to be all in. A way of looking at it would be that I'm going to take a negative metaphor of conquest, and I'm going to try to redeem it, okay? So when it comes to Jesus, go all the way. Don't settle for second base. Okay, that's what James is asking for here. When it comes to Jesus, you go all the way. You score, baby. Okay, you go to home plate, you get it, you go all the way, you follow Jesus completely. You know what, I don't know, I guess the Tigers could do this lately. Just hit the ball out of the park and stay at second base. Where do I go? Of course, they probably wouldn't hit the ball. They're doing so well right now. But it's that idea, though, that, man, go all the way with Jesus. Don't just settle for part. Don't just settle for half. Go all the way. And here's what's great about being of God's beloved, that when you screw up, He will offer you grace and forgiveness. He will offer grace and forgiveness and will help you with strength and courage to overcome it next time and to do better and to improve. But go all the way. Hey, it's just... If you don't, another analogy for you. We got time. Why not? Another analogy for you. A person who is unwilling to do that for Christ would be like standing at an altar and then saying that you agree with half the vows. Yeah, I'll be faithful to you. I will treat you and only you as my spouse in sickness and in health and rich and in, well, maybe not poor. If you don't bring in over a certain amount of money, then I'm finding myself a new boyfriend or girlfriend. Or I'm willing to treat you only as my spouse, but I'm not willing to give up my boyfriend or girlfriend over here. And in health, in richest and poor in health, but if you get too sick, you're going to get traded for a younger model. What would a self-respecting, appropriate spouse to be do at that point? Leave them at the altar, right? Okay, this is not going to be a marriage. This is not going to be appropriate. Okay, that's the problem with that. It's saying I'm not going to be faithful everywhere. I'm only going to be faithful where it's most convenient. Okay, and that is not how we're supposed to treat Christ, like that. Okay, we are not supposed to treat it that way. We just need to be all in. Okay, we don't go to Jesus and put our toe in the water and test the waters. We cannonball. Okay, we don't wade in up to the waist and go, "Ooh, this is cold." We cannonball. Okay? We cannonball for Christ. That's what that's going to look like. So, the last part here, the fourth part, so James has already been saying, hey, you know what? You're going to be slow to speak. You're going to be a person who listens. You're going to be a person who's slow to anger. You're going to be patient. You're going to be a person who's not going to be a moral compromiser. And you're going to be humble. Okay? You're going to humbly receive the word that is implanted. Humbly receive it. A person who is humble is a person who does not act like a know-it-all, and they have a teachable spirit. A person who knows that they are not the answer to things. A person who knows that they have growth to do, and if someone comes to you with correction, you receive it. Because you know you got growth to do, and you got that teachable spirit. Complete teachable spirit. We're going to be hitting humility heavily when we get toward the end of chapter 2, I believe it is. This is going to be a great time. So I'm just going to introduce that concept here, to have a teachable spirit, accepting correction, accepting rebuke. Okay, that's what it means to be humble. I am not the answer. I am not the know-it-all. I am not the perfection of. And I'll tell you what, if you are truly humble, slow to speak is easier. The people that are not slow to speak, that say, hey, I don't really know, but maybe the answer is, that means that they're the authority in their mind, and they're quick to speak because they got something to say. And they lack humility. Okay, a person who is not slow to anger tend not to be humble. Humbleness, if you're truly humble, you're slow to anger because you don't view the offense as attacking your identity. You don't view anybody's offense as being that strongly against you because, after all, their offense to you is only a penny in a bucket compared to what you've done to an offense to God. And you recognize your position. And if anybody criticizes you, you don't have to criticize back because you know that they cannot criticize you more than the cross of Christ already have, because Jesus already said that you deserve to die. And no matter what criticism anybody gets you, it's not a death sentence. But God says you deserve a death sentence. And then Jesus died on your behalf. So the cross has already criticized you. There's nothing anyone can say more. If anything, you can say, hey, your criticism against me, that just shows me that I have more growth to do and that I'm in need of a Savior. It shows me that I got a way to go before I can get to any part of heavier maturity. It just shows that, even when you're not right, that's just a glimpse of where my sin really lies. You just don't know it yet. If we're humble, man, we can be slow to speak and slow to anger. So much easier. So much easier. But when we struggle with those first two, this last one's probably a problem as well. And I wanted to find a way to get this to stick. I wanted to find a way to really communicate this to you guys in a way that will just not be forgotten, in a way that you might really remember, in a way that you might really, really get it. Well, yeah, and beyond that, I want us to really get this, okay? That James says in verse 22, to be doers of the word, not hearers only. Okay, don't just hear about being humble. Don't just hear about removing moral filth. Don't just hear about speaking slowly or slow of speech. Don't just hear about being slow to anger, but to be doers of the word. Be doers of it, okay? So I wanted to find an analogy, and I came across an analogy that another pastor used, and here's what it's called. It's called taking out the trash, okay? So it's called taking out the trash, and I love this analogy. I want to share this story with you to really ponder, to really just get, okay? So Here's this analogy called taking out the trash. So let's just say within the story, there's a dad who wakes up, he takes a shower, he's ready to go to work. On his way to leave for work, he is right on the wire. He's getting ready to leave as he needs to leave. And he looks around the house and he notices that the house is just filled with trash. Okay? This is the picture of one of y'all's living room. I'm not going to tell you whose. I'm just kidding. Okay, but he notices that the house is filled with trash. And he looks outside and the dumpster's filled with trash, just trash everywhere. And he notices it's trash day. The dumpster's going to be coming in just a few hours. Okay, so he decides, okay, on my way to work, I'm going to leave a note for the kids. Okay, so he leaves a note. And he says, "Dear children, I love you guys. You guys are going to be going to school soon. I appreciate what you guys are going to be going through. May the Lord strengthen you. May he be with you. You guys have been wonderful children and a blessing to me." It's a very loving letter. On your way, could you please gather up the trash and take it out to the dumpster and move it all to the curb, please. Okay, for those that, because we have the policy regarding extra baggage laws, you'll find the tags in the upper right-hand corner of this one drawer, aka junk drawer. Okay, you will find the luggage tags there, or the luggage tags. You'll find the garbage tags there that you can attach to the bags to be able to set it next to the can for the dumpster to take. Okay, please, you kids, I'm so thankful that you're my children. You're wonderful kids. Again, have a great day at school. May you be blessed. Love, Dad. Okay, then he leaves and goes to work. So he's done writing this wonderful, gorgeous letter. Then he comes home. And the trash has not been taken out. He comes home, and the trash is still, the big dumpster thingy, the little big trash container is still up at the side of the house. He walks into the house, and everything is still like it was. No bags have been tied. No tags have been taken out of the drawer. Nothing. So he decides it is time to have a family powwow. So he takes his kids and he sits them down. Okay, and he says, "Children, I need to talk to you." They're like, "You're going to tell us about how you and Mom met?" No. We need to have a different talk. Okay, we need to have a different talk. He just is like, I have a question for you. I was wondering, did you get my letter? And the kids say, "Yes, Dad. Yeah, we got the letter. It was a great letter. It was such a loving letter. The imagery was astounding. The punctuation was perfect. It was all the words and the verbs were in the right tense. It was so well written. In fact, we could even make an English class based on this letter. It was fantastic. And Dad, did you know that you're a great writer? Did you know that you had a lot of great concepts and great structure on this? In fact, because you were so loving toward us, we wanted to take it so seriously that we went ahead and skipped school. And we stayed home. We invited other friends to come over, and they skipped school, and they came over, and we all studied the letter together. And we formed ourselves a little itty-bitty group. And we spent the whole day studying the letter, trying to figure out what it meant and what it's about. In fact, Dad, we have discovered we've never thought about trash like this before. We started looking at how other cultures do trash removal. We started learning about other ways of trash removal. We learned about carbon footing. We learned about recycling. We learned about so much, Dad. We just really got this great concept understood. And then we decided, hey, let's see what the Bible says about this. So we opened up the Bible and we looked through the Old Testament about how they took out the trash and how the trash from the Old Testament had a symbolism for sin. And you're supposed to remove it from you and take the trash out. And then they would light it on fire and it would burn. And they would call that place Gehenna, and it became an image for hell. And it was amazing how sin can lead you to that place of destruction if you're not careful, if you don't remove it. And then we went to the New Testament. And in the New Testament, it also had imagery of trash and all this stuff. In fact, did you know, Dad, that Paul actually called religion trash? Isn't that interesting? And so we learned about that and what that meant. And we ended up telling our kids, hey, I know what we can do. All our friends and us, we got together, we made a website, and we called it The Theology of Trash. And we want to tell everybody about this amazing thing. And so we wanted everyone to learn about the theology of trash. And then the dad asks again, but did you take the trash out? And the kids say, don't know. Sorry, Dad. We were too busy doing word studies and having small groups about trash. Let me offer, this is what churches do every week. Every week. We gather together and we have an academic session. We gather together and we learn word studies. We learn phrases. We learn about history. We learn about cultures. We learn about the Old Testament and New Testament. We learn about genealogies. We learn about people, and we learn about verses, and we learn about all this stuff to, in the end, leave not taking out the trash. That we end up leaving being hearers only. And we don't do anything. And we don't do anything. We have turned Christianity and the Bible into an academic exercise instead of a lifestyle. We have turned it into something that we learn, but we don't ever do anything with. We have people that say, yes, I learned all this stuff about what it means to be a loving spouse and how to love a wife and to be a good dad, but then they don't do it. We have all these people that will come and they will hear about how Jesus says to go and be my voice and my hands and my feet and get out there and minister to people and spread the kingdom and spread the gospel. And they hear about how to do it, ways to do it. They study books on how to do it. They have a bookshelf full of books on how to do it, but they don't do anything. And we talk about having ministries and stuff to be able to be gathered. And all that ministry is simply about education. It's not about doing anything. And we end up being a whole bunch of people that hear the word and want to teach everybody else on how to hear the word, but again, do not do anything. And then we wonder why Christianity is not spreading throughout the country like it has since the foundation of the country. What has happened over the past 30 years? That the Word of God has suddenly gone in a great decline. And every year it gets worse and it gets worse and it gets worse. And that's because we're getting so much more focus on scientific academia that we have lost the doing. We have lost the doing. Yes, we need to understand, but what good does understanding do if you don't do anything with it? It's like getting all these college degrees just to get a job doing something unrelated. What's the point? What's the purpose? We got to start doing. Got to start doing. So that's our challenge this wonderful Father's Day. And it's not just for dads, it's not just for moms, it's not just for children, it is for every single one of us. What are you doing for the kingdom? Not what are you looking at and observing and thinking that maybe a year down the road we might be able, not trying to gather together and think that we might be able to learn this. What are you doing today? What are you doing today? It can be a real temptation to go to a festival, to go to a 4th of July event and want to say, hey, let's just gather together and huddle ourselves as our own little blob, and let's just have an event for us. Let's just minister to ourselves. But then you're not doing anything. You're not making a difference in anyone's life anywhere. So this is where James leaves us for today. You've heard. Now what are you going to do? We have 4 things to start with. We had things about being patient and slow to speak and slow to anger and being humble and removing moral filth. Those are just the start. This is just James chapter 1. It's just 3.5 verses right here of chapter 1. We still got the rest of 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 to do. We're going to be here for 4 months in this book. And that's in addition to where we've already been. So we got 4 months to go, and it's going to be centered on what are you going to do? Will you take out the trash, or are you just going to study it? Let's have a word of prayer.